this is Ken Parker welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable, where we bring together a panel with diverse views on issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let's review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of common ground. At the end of each segment, I put in my 2 cents on the topic and give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. Time permitting, sometimes we also have a perspective segment in which I offer a view on a current topic in the news. We'll see if we have time for that tonight. As usual on Common Ground, we have some interesting topics, and I have to say tonight we have an absolutely fabulous panel. I'm just very, very excited. We have an experienced panelist and an experienced panelist who's never been a panelist before, but very experienced in many areas. So, but a first-time panelist on Common Ground. So, without further ado, let me introduce tonight's distinguished panel. Greer Swiston, fabulous having you back on the show, Greer.
Always a pleasure.
Greer was a 3-term Newton City Councilor and basically has done almost everything. If you were to just make up a list of stuff people could do, Greer has probably done it. Taught math, she's done that. Been an engineer, done that. You know, it's like volunteered in nonprofits, she's done that. I mean, it's like it's the what's keeping you busy these days, Greer?
Coaching the high school Lagerbots team and teaching at a private school and, you know, hopefully traveling a lot more.
Traveling is good.
Yes.
Any favorite destinations?
We're going to Southeast Asia next January.
Oh, cool.
And I'm trying to talk my husband into going to Norway.
We were in Norway, not this past summer, but the summer before.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's it was really nice. I really liked Sweden too. We did like 3 of the 4 Scandinavian countries. But yeah, Norway was really.
He says we're only allowed to go in the summertime, so.
Well.
Because it's too cold otherwise.
We were there in August, and it was lovely. So
wonderful.
But well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And thank you for all you do for the community. Lagerbots is a fabulous program, and it wouldn't be what it is without all the time and effort that you've put in over the years. So thank you so much for what you've done for Newton High School students there. And Stephen Farrell, our newbie. Young man, welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Ken. A pleasure to be here.
Stephen is a finishing your first term,
yes.
Newly re-elected
yes.
city councilor from Ward 8. And so that's sort of the southern tip of the city, Oak Hill Park,
yes.
and sort of the countryside school area, and then all the way over to the Memorial Spalding area.
Yep, through Newton South High School.
In Newton South High School. So the southern peninsula of Newton, as it
yes.
were, surrounded by the Charles there.
We're here to remind you that we exist and we're going to do good things all the time.
Right. Well, always a pleasure having folks from Ward 8 at this table. I think in the very early days of the show, we had she was then recently retired city councilor and newly elected state rep Ruth Balzer when we first started the show. We've had, we've had Cindy Cream at this table. We've had a lot of, I think Cindy later moved out of Ward 8, but we've had a lot of fabulous people from Ward 8 at this table.
You're making me cower now, so.
Well, but there's quality people from every ward of the city, as we have proven time and time again by having them here at finding common ground.
Well, in fact, I'd just like to compliment Greer on her work at Lagerbots. I'm going to be volunteering to do that this year for the first time. So
oh, that would be awesome.
I'm very excied about it. I've been to a lot of them. So
well, that's great to hear. And in addition to your work on the city council, you had a long distinguished career in the nonprofit sector, as I understand.
I did. I was doing mostly fundraising for a variety of nonprofit organizations. I worked for the Massachusetts College of Art. I worked for the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston, to name a few.
All fabulous institutions.
Yes, they are.
I had the pleasure of guest lecturing at Mass College of Art, I think not last spring, but the spring before it, to a filmmaking class on copyright law and how much of other people's work they could use in their films without permission.
Great. It's a great school.
It was
terrific school.
It's Boston's fabulous that we have so many great colleges and arts institutions.
Indeed.
It's like
We're very lucky.
Absolutely. We found common ground already. We're done. Okay. No. But this is our post-election special. So we have one former city councilor and one current two former city councilors, if I'm included in that calculus, and one current one. And what I'd like to talk about is the implications of this year's election for policy in Newton and beyond. And we have something that doesn't happen that often in Newton, which is we have a new mayor got elected. Mm-hmm. And I would say something that, to my memory, has never happened before, is we had someone elected to their first term as mayor without much of a contested race. Now, people have gotten reelected with only token opposition. I believe David Cohen, I think, had Tony Lupo as his opponent. I know Ted Mann had several nominal opponents over the years. But the fact that Mark Laredo got elected over an opponent, I mean, it's astonishing numbers. Mark got, and you'll pardon my poor vision here, 17,833 votes.
Oh, wow.
To his opponent, Mr. Ciccinelli's 3,111. By the way, I want to compliment Albert Ciccinelli for throwing his hat into the ring, because it's easy to feel overwhelmed and not run for office, but I think it would be a real disservice if we didn't have a contested election at all. Like, in fact, Boston, our neighbor to the east, had no opponent at all in the general election because the second-placed finisher in the preliminary chickened out and just dropped out of the race entirely. So I'm delighted, though, that we had a contested race, and I'm interested in hearing from the panelists what they think we should expect from Mayor Mark Laredo. Greer, what are your expectations?
Well, I had the pleasure of serving with Mark for a little bit while we were on the city council. I think that what I admire most about Mark is, regardless where his views already are, that he's pretty good at listening. You know, as long as you speak to him respectfully, he's still pretty willing to listen to what other views are. So I'm hoping to see a more balanced more balanced mayor, because it's never great. We were just talking about our former mayor, Seti Warren, with whom I probably never agreed a single policy on. But to his credit, he used to always call me. He goes, "I know you're not going to agree with me, Greer, so I just want to hear what you have to say." So, so I'm very positive. Do you expect not to agree with Mark on anything, or do you think are there any issues you? I think that Mark and I are probably 50-50. I think I probably have agreed with him about as often as I've disagreed with him, and it's all been a good conversation.
Do you think he'll be a good mayor for the city?
I think so. He's demonstrated good leadership skills as president of the council, and he was president of the school committee before that. So that seems to be his thing. So I think he can do well.
Stephen, what do you think of Mark Laredo?
Let me first say I'm really pleased with Al Ciccinelli that he did run. He had some difficult times during the campaign and really couldn't, some health issues, but he fought really hard, and I think that that's important to do. I'm always concerned that we have uncontested races where people don't have an opportunity to really listen to divergent views of what people propose to do if they're elected. I see Mark Laredo very favorably. I've had the pleasure of working with him for the past 2 years, and I couldn't agree more with Greer than he listens. He is willing to listen, even if it's a tough time. And I'm very pleased about that, because there have been periods when I feel the current administration is on its own and hasn't been really concerned with the full issues of the full viewpoints of the council. So I think that's really important. He won't not only listen to us, but he will listen to the people around the city. And to have somebody who does that and then takes that information into account in making decisions is really important.
Thanks, Stephen. Wow, it sounds like we have a lot of common ground already on the Mark Laredo topic. I guess I'll just put my 2 cents in and we can roll along to the next thing, because I don't think we're going to find much disagreement here. I will, full disclosure, as I've said at this table before, I served, I guess it's past tense now since the election's over, on Mark Laredo's campaign committee, and it was an honor and a privilege to be around that virtual table in Zoom meetings, because one of the very impressive things about Mark was the tremendously smart and thoughtful people that he attracted to his cause and surrounded himself with. And you're really like, wow, it's like the quality. I think it says something a lot about someone, the quality of people that they surround themselves with. And I think both of the panelists here, Greer and Stephen, have observed that he listens. So if you're listening to smart people and incorporating what they have to say, that's a good first step in being a leader.
Yep.
The other thing that I will say about Mark, and I did have the pleasure of serving with him on the city council, is he has the ability to disagree without being disagreeable. And that, in politics, is an increasingly rare skill, where people have to be the enemy of anyone who disagrees with them. And of course, it's sort of the anathema of what the theme of this show is. It's like to take people who disagree and try to find some common ground. But we started the show 20 years ago because politics seemed like it was starting to get a little less friendly, and so more confrontational, right, Greer? So, and to me, Mark is a throwback to a better time in politics when you can have that disagreement and still, not take it personally.
Right.
So, I'm very, very optimistic that he will not only do valuable and innovative things, but that he will bring the community along and build consensus in a way we haven't seen possibly since Ted Mann. That's how optimistic I am.
Oh.
That's going back a ways to 1994. So, 30 some odd years, right? Anyway, moving right along to the next topic. Let's do city council next, since you're on the city council. Now, I will preface the city council discussion by saying that I thought there was a really clear message 2 years ago in the city council election, that people felt that the Newton implementation of the MBTA Communities Act went a little too far, or that the one that hadn't been passed yet, but the one that was being pushed by the administration, that was going to do more than what was required in terms of density and in terms of numbers of units. And people were like, well, let's comply, but let's not go overboard. And I felt like just almost everyone I talked to in that election cycle was sort of feeling that. And then you could see that the candidates who wanted to meet the requirements of the act but not exceed them seemed to do very well. This time, I'm not so sure what the message was, or if there was a message. So you're in the thick of it, Stephen. What do you take away from this election as the mood of the Newton voters with respect to the city council?
I think it is very different this year, and I'm very hopeful that we will have a council that will work with each other, particularly when we're as large a body as we are. One of the indicators, I think, that people, I'm always concerned, to be honest, when there are so many uncontested races. I really think that hurts us as a community. We're not able to have a sense of a difference of opinion where people want to lead us. So I'm disappointed in that. And I think part of that is because people are more comfortable this year. Although there will be 7 new councilors, but only 3 of them were really in contested races. And all in all, I think it was a good campaign and a good election season. I will say, frankly, I look forward to meeting the councilors the new councilor from Ward 4. I do not know him.
Cyrus Duhamel, is it?
I apologize. I haven't met him. I don't have the message.
I have the spelling, but I'm sorry, it's Damubed.
Yeah,
Dahmubed.
Right.
Damubed. Do we know how to pronounce
He's
that?
young and seems very enthusiastic, and I look forward to the opportunity to really have a chance to be in.
So he was one of the three in a contested race
Yes.
you're referring to.
But I was very, very much in favor of John Chimanis, who I think is would have been a terrific addition. We'll wait and see about Cyrus. I'm
Well,
hopeful.
people don't necessarily win the first time they run, too.
Absolutely
Maybe he'll
true.
give it another go. You said interesting. You said something that I found very interesting. That you think three were effectively in contested races. The quick math would be the Ward 4 race. Cyrus is a new person who was in a contested race. Ward 5 ward councilor was a contested race, and then there were two in Ward 6. So that would be 1 + 1 + 2 would be 4. Are you discounting one of those as not being a
No, I'm
contested
saying
race?
Ward 4, Ward 5, and Ward 6.
Oh, I see. But there were two. But of the 7 new
yes.
councils,
Yeah,
4 were elected via
Yes, I apologize.
via
You're
some
right.
choice on the ballot. Anyway,
I
I mean,
always,
how rigorous the campaigns were varied, of course.
yeah,
but-
they were very rigorous, I think.
Yes.
And,
in
that
those
was good.
races.
That's always good.
Okay, so you voters sending a message this time or not, though?
I don't think so. I think that we may, depending on your time and what you're used to, I think there was a message sent this time, but I'm not sure it was about the city council.
Oh, well, we get to the school committee. Is that what you were intimating?
That's one. Yes.
Okay.
I think there were two messages then.
Okay. Did one relate to the ballot question?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we we will get to those.
Yes.
But for city council, we're not hearing a strong message. Greer, did you detect a message being sent by voters this time?
Not from the voters. Not that they had the opportunity to. Like Stephen said, not many of the races were really contested. So even if the voters had some kind of message to send, it's not like there was a choice to be made.
Right.
But if what you're saying is therefore not that many people stepped out to run for office is sending a message, then I would agree. We didn't have as much contested races. I don't know. I'm kind of curious why so many of them stepped down. We don't have term limits on city council. So I think that's one of the largest.
You say that as someone who stepped down after 3 terms, though.
Yeah, but I challenged people to run against me a couple of times, and they didn't want to. And finally, here, well, somebody else has got to replace me. So that's the only way that's going to happen is if I step down. Then I step down. If you remember, that year was a contested race, though, for the seat that I vacated.
Right. Well, we had. You also had a couple contested races. Your first time and your second time you ran.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think contested races are really good.
But we're not hearing any message from the voters about other than.
I don't think so.
Other than maybe.
I think they were focused on the other two races,
Okay.
like Stephen was
All right.
saying.
Well, we'll get to those momentarily. I actually think that there is some bit of a message in the contested races. Not as political a message in the sense of here's a policy we like and here's a policy we don't like, but I think there's sort of a disposition that people have expressed some fondness for, and I was very impressed by the margins in the Ward 6 at-large city council race. I think people have gotten to know Lisa Gordon, who has run a couple times before, and the more people get to know Lisa Gordon, the more impressed with her they are. And I think her vote total, really equivalent and even a little higher than a lot of the incumbents running, is really impressive. She had 10,972 votes, almost as many in a contested race as in a three-way race as a lot of people, well, more than almost 11,000 votes, more than many of the people in uncontested races. And the second place finisher in that, Sean N.D. Roach, had 8,720. So in other words, more than 2,000 votes behind her. And then the third place finisher, Ted Gross, was about 5,000. So you can, but I think that people were really attracted to her calm and thoughtful approach, which I think is kind of a model for good government functioning well. And I think I saw something similar in the Ward 5 ward councilor race, where, not to disparage in any way the second place finisher, but I thought that Julie Irish was very impressive in her ability to show that she was taking a really thoughtful and open approach, and I feel like that's almost a template for candidates going forward.
So basically, you're being optimistic that our local election and the local voters are saying that we're now valuing this reasonable, agreeable to people that can disagree.
I think people can disagree. I think that's right, and we can see that in the mayor's race too, because there wasn't really a contested race. But part of that is because people liked Mark so much.
Right.
It's sort of a circular logic. But no, I really do feel like people might be getting fed up with bluster. I think.
And angry.
Right.
And the
angry, confrontational. And I'm not saying that the opponents in those races were angry and confrontational. I think one of them had a history of that and maybe overcame it a little bit this time around, or didn't show that side of his personality. But I do feel as though people are hungry for civility.
Yes.
True. I would agree with that. I'm not sure they're really excited about what they think government can do for them. And I think that's part of the issue why it's such a low turnout. That
It was a pretty high turnout for a local election, though.
Without much of a contested mayor's race.
Local elections are where the rubber meets the road. I mean,
You and I agree with that, but historically in our elections, that's not true.
no, I understand. And
Well, let's see. What did we have? Total votes cast. We could look at total votes for mayor, since very few people. So registered voters in Newton, 60,000.
I believe they said over
and we had
23,000.
Yeah, 23,142 ballots cast. So for a only marginally contested mayor's race, one ballot question citywide, which we'll talk about in a couple minutes. Historically, I think that's pretty good turnout for Newton, which, by the way, isn't typical of other cities and towns necessarily. I always felt, running for office in Newton, that people weren't most Newton residents and Newton voters weren't that concerned about Newton government. They were much better informed about international events and national politics, and to some extent state politics. But of the 24 aldermen, I used to joke that there aren't 25 people in the city who aren't on the city council who could name 3 members of the city council.
that's really true too. But I think the voters definitely show an interest when they need that pothole filled.
Oh, yes.
Or when the road that's being repaved has been going on for 3 weeks.
Right. I think it cuts both ways, though, because angry voters who are unhappy tend to show up more. So to some extent, it's complacency. Things are going pretty well. I don't need to worry about it. But I agree, it would be nice to see a higher level of participation. Let us proceed to something where I think there was a really clear message from the voters. I think it'll be interesting to see how each of you characterize it. I think you're both aware, or both would agree that there was a message. I'm referring, of course, to the school committee results. I'm really curious to see how you see that message as what it was, because there's a lot of possible messages one could read from that. Greer, what was your takeaway from the results of the contested school committee races?
So I think it was very clear that the voters wanted people who cared about the students and cared about education. I believe I read, I don't know if it was accurate, but there was a quote from a member of the NTA who actually...
Newton Teachers Association.
Yep, the Newton Teachers Association, who actually said it's not about the kids, and I think that pissed a lot of people off. Because if school is not about the kids, what is it about? I think it's very, very key. That's not the attitude they want to see coming from our educational leaders.
But in fairness, I don't think that's the attitude of most of the teachers.
No. Oh, I don't think so. But you've heard me say this before. I don't think the union always represents the teachers, despite the fact that they claim that they do. I've known many teachers who disagreed with the union but felt they had no choice but to toe the line.
So you think the message was students are the top priority? That's what you took away from it. Stephen, do you have a...
You're not going to get much conflict between us tonight, Ken. Yes, I think that
I know we will on the next one.
Okay.
But you can disagree with that being disagreeable on that one, right?
I think that is what Greer said is absolutely true, that there was a sense that it had to be on top of mind of everyone who was running, that the kids are first. I also think that there are many people who are beginning to recognize the enormous achievements of Anna Nolan in just 2 years. She came into a system that really wasn't working well for lots of reasons, COVID, whatever else. But it was a system that really wasn't working well. And she had to not only deal with that, not disrepair, but I mean the problems with what were going on in the system. But then she immediately got stuck with a strike and the conflict of that. And I think since then, she has demonstrated to the teachers what I'm certain Mark will do for the rest of us, that she's willing to listen. And she wants to work with the teachers, and she believes in the teachers. And she believes we've got great teachers. But we have a system that still needs a lot of repair. So I'm very excited about having her here. And I'm very excited we'll have a school committee that I think will support her. And the goals, which her goals are obviously, well, I hope obviously, are the kids. Yeah.
I will say, I was commenting earlier, one of my new reincarnations is I'm a teacher now, granted in a private school. But, I do think that, most teachers I run into, they went into this profession because they wanted to educate students. But respect starts from the top. Mm-hmm. They want to educate our kids. They need respect from the parents and respect from the administration. Right. To a certain extent, I'm going to say it again, I feel that there are definitely a lot of instances where the union is not actually listening to their own members. And, that disrespect goes down the line, and the student, when teachers don't feel respected, how can they do their job? So
I think we've got a good. Do you want to respond to that, Stephen?
No, I agree with it, and I think there was the system that Anna Nolan walked into was, as she often says, it was a system of schools and not a school system. And I think what she meant by that is, I am not an educator. There's a reason why I ran for the city council, not the school committee. But
you're not quoting her now. You're saying,
no,
should you?
No, she's probably grateful that I didn't. But anyhow, I think what she meant was that as she arrived here, my sense is that she found a system where all of the schools were operating kind of independently, and that wasn't good for anybody. It certainly wasn't a good way to make policy, and that she has been working to bring them together and create common curriculum and other things. So I just think she's spectacular, and I think we're all fortunate to have her here.
It's funny, there's a story that I heard when I was running for mayor back in 2009, and I had people who were active in the Zervis community on my campaign team, and they were saying, well, at Zervis, we discovered that this everyday math curriculum, as they called it, wasn't working. It was this spiraling thing, and they had this explanation. So they had enough, let's say, gunpowder, firepower in that community. They basically formed a committee of really impressive folks who had a lot of background in, I think, education and science and technology and industry, and they just ripped that curriculum apart, put it back together. They just got a lot better math results than anybody else was getting in the Newton schools because they worked with the teachers, and they found a way of getting around the top of the system. And it always seemed to me like that's great for Zervis, but it would be nice if the rest of the schools had the benefit of that kind of innovation.
And I think that's a sort of opportunity that Nolan will look at and say, let's figure out how we get that to the other schools. And make
I
that
think she
work.
may
So,
already have been doing that, and not just her, but other members of her staff and of the school committee. I think have been very open to looking at questions of not assuming everything we've done in the past is the best way of doing things. I will not disagree with anything about the result of the election and the message the voters were sending with respect to the contested school committee races, but I want to add two things to it. One is that people are very happy with the current school committee chair and his leadership because his endorsement was very powerful. Chris Brzezinski, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, endorsed the winners in everyone, or the people he endorsed won decisively in every race, and they were also endorsed. It wasn't just him, but they were very happy with former school committee chair Matt Hills, and of course with Mark Laredo, all three of whom endorsed the people who ended up winning in those races. And I think part of it was the messengers, and people have respect for those individuals, and part of it was the message. And to me, the message had the components that folks have referred to here, but I wouldn't call it an anti-union vote, because I think if you ask Newton residents, Newton residents are generally very pro-union. I think it was an anti-strike vote. I think people in Newton were very, very upset with how quickly the teachers went on strike, and but I mean also fundamentally that we have the way I look at it is we make a bargain in our society, and some people have the right to strike, and in exchange for not having the right to strike, public employees get some pensions that private sector employees don't get. So it's kind of like you've made a deal here. You could teach at a private school if you wanted the right to strike, and you'd have the right to strike. You chose to teach at a public school, and I guess I've always been a little bit of a stickler for playing by the rules. Well, I mean, to the point where one more anecdote from my days as a city councilor. I used to get calls from people who are very, very upset that there was illegal swimming going on in Crystal Lake. We have a rule, darn it. You can't swim in that side of the lake. Let's follow the rules. That's not the swimming area.
Right.
Very upset. And the same people were very upset that they weren't allowed to have their dogs off leash. Like, how come I can't have? Why are they ticketing? They were mad. They got ticketed or got a warning for not having the. And then you had people who were in the exact opposite situation. People who were like, I just want to swim across the lake, but darn it, these dogs off leash are driving me nuts. I mean, it's like we got to enforce the law. It's like you can't. Part of what we do in a democracy is we make compromises. And we decide these are the rules we're all going to live by. And if you don't like the rules, you change them, you don't disobey them. So if teachers thought they should have the right to strike, they should work with the legislature and get the law changed. Or by the same token, I mean, and this gets to national politics today, I think we have a little bit of a calculus going on in the White House, which isn't what's the law, it's what can I get away with.
Right.
And I think that's the outgrowth of a little bit of, shall we call it rugged individualism that has developed over the past generation. And so, I'm going to be an old stodgy guy and say, follow the darn rules. You're not supposed to strike. That should be enough right there.
Especially when you are the teachers of such young children. This is like the most impressionable age. What are you teaching the kids? Don't follow rules?
Well, that's it. That is exactly it, Greer. How am I supposed to say to my kid, don't cheat on the test, even though it would be really easy to do it? The question isn't whether you can get away with it, it's whether what the rule is. And, we do it because it's the right thing, because we've decided as a society that's the way things should be, right? Don't anyway.
It isn't that there aren't rules and laws that shouldn't be changed, but there's a process for doing it.
Exactly. Right. And ignoring the ones you don't like being applied to you is not the proper process.
Right.
Anyway, little pet peeve of mine I felt I need to vent about. Now, again, we could go deeper into this, but I'm not saying civil disobedience like slavery, civil rights, and but be prepared to deal with the consequences. If you're gonna block an intersection because of something that you find morally reprehensible, you should be doing your time in prison for that. Spend the night in jail for it. Anyway, that having been said, we did have another thing on the ballot this year, above and beyond all these wonderful people who put their names into the public discourse to run for office. And I refer, of course, to our citywide ballot question on the proposal was to end the overnight parking ban that applies seasonally in, I guess it's called the winter overnight parking ban, although it doesn't correspond exactly with the winter season. But I know here that we have at least something that, on the surface, our panelists might not have come to this table with 100% agreement on. Now, as voters know, this was a terrific example of why it makes sense to show up and vote, because this was decided citywide in an election in which 23,142 people showed up to vote by 71 votes. So it really does, your vote does count. And so I'm going to ask the panelists, very close vote on this. What can we learn from this? And feel free to editorialize as to what your views were. Yeah. Stephen?
I was in favor of repealing the ban. Let me start also with secondarily, since I've already started that, but there is a huge parking problem in Newton, and particularly in some of the areas not throughout the city. Relatively speaking, Ward 8 doesn't have a parking problem. Now, Nantum has a serious parking problem, and so do other parts of the city. And I think we need to address this parking problem, but do it by area. And this law certainly didn't do that. It also was a law that was calling a snow ban law so that the streets could be cleaned, but you only do it from 2 to 6 in the morning. But that means cars can stay in those parking places until 2, and they can come right back at 6:01.
Not even that. They could move. They could show up. They could be there till 3, and then they could move and come back at 3:01.
Absolutely.
You just cannot be there continuously for those. And so which was always a challenge to enforce.
Right. And the streets were going to be snowy, and the cars would still be there. But I think we've learned with this technology of today that it is possible to say to people, we have it on very good authority from the National Weather Service, that there's going to be a snowstorm. So for Newton, we're going to require the snow ban for the next 48 hours. And if it snows, we'll do it until the streets are cleared. But to make people move every single night when there is no threat of snow absolutely makes no sense at all.
Okay. Stephen?
Yes.
Clearly articulated what a silly policy the city had.
I think so.
And so my question is, how is it possible that your view did not prevail? What's wrong with those voters?
We were really close. And I think...
Well, why wasn't it 90%? That just makes so much sense to me. What could have gone wrong there?
I think it turned out that no matter which side you're on, we all want the same thing. We need a parking plan in this city. A parking plan that makes sense. And even immediately right after the vote, the pro-removal of the ban and the pro-supporters of the ban got together right away and put out a note saying, we're going to work on this together. What they have to work on is us, the city council. And we have to pay a lot of attention to this. We cannot, for the next however many years that the snow ban was in fact, for 40 years, we can't let it go another year. We really need to take the time, make the time, to answer this question. And it's one of the reasons I'm very frustrated by the mayor's current effort to have us review this ride, walk, skate initiative that we're going to be voting on Monday night. And it's an effort to do more diet programs on different streets. First of all, we don't have any. We don't have any.
I think for the benefit of our viewers, we
Oh,
ought to
yes.
explain the terminology a little bit, because diet programs does sound like a fitness effort in
Yes.
some way. Road diet is, I think, what you're referring to, like Washington Street,
Yes.
where they
Yeah.
reduce the number of lanes or the width of the lanes
Right.
to have less road bandwidth for motor vehicles and more for pedestrians and bicycles. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, and I think we should consider bicycles, and people like to use bicycles, and people want to walk more. That's all very important. But to do this, as the mayor wants us to vote on this Monday night, when
There's no
if you want to listen to what the voice of the people said on Tuesday night, they said by 1,170 more votes than they voted for either mayoral candidate, that they want the parking situation fixed. And you can't.
Wait a second, you're adding the votes, the yes and no votes together?
Yes, and you add.
Well, how do you know the no votes weren't perfectly happy with the current situation?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that they were not.
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, then here we'll go, because this is a no person. But
Well,
the
I mean,
point
there
is,
might be some people in the know who who like it, but I don't think that they were the majority
No, and
either.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say I'm in agreement. I think that most of the supporters of the no vote is that there needs to be a better parking policy as well. And right now, this parking ban is making life a little bit more survivable for them, and they're not willing to let it go until a better policy in place.
why
If both of
survival?
us-
What's the? Tell us, Greer. What do people like about the current seasonal overnight parking ban?
Well, one really big consideration of it is the fact that legally you can't park all year round is making all the developers have to accommodate parking every time they build.
Isn't that kind of a backwards way of achieving that? Can't you just require off-street parking?
That would be great. That would be great.
Haven't we always done that, though?
But apparently not. A lot of development has been better controlled because
Well-
not just development, but landlords and the way that they rent their tenants.
To be fair to you and to our audience, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek here, of course, because that had always been the policy. But as I'm sure Stephen knows, since he's been on the council for the last couple of years, there have been some changes to that policy
Yes.
recently.
but
And they
You
get
agree, you
waived.
finish.
They get waived a lot. I mean, they feel
Well,
like
it's been rescinded. There's no parking. Am I wrong that they've just totally rescinded it in the VCOD districts? There is no off-street parking requirement.
right,
in-
because
in
they're
a lot.
saying, oh, just get people
And now
who
I'm
don't
using
own
acronyms,
cars.
but the Village Center Overlay District.
Right.
Yes, yes. There is that, and they
I get
are
three
like, oh
demerits
yeah,
for
you would
using it.
still use, oh, you can still do development because these are all people. It's near, public transit. These people don't need cars, and the only way that our streets aren't going to get crowded, and right now we already have that issue where there is very, very dangerous lack of visibility in many of our streets because they're so parked chock full of cars right now, and we can't wait.
Okay, so we have a sense here that both sides are not happy with the status quo
Right.
in the overnight parking situation. So I want to ask both of you, if you could just say, okay, here's what the law should be, what would you propose? What do you think would be better than what we have now, but not as bad as a total repeal of the overnight, or should exist in its place? Any ideas?
I haven't.
If I
you go. Since you're on the
I'm
board.
going to be very snide and sarcastic. I was going to say, if I knew that answer, Mark Laredo would not be the next mayor. I would be.
Okay. You think
No.
that's the killer issue? That
It's,
would win
it's a
the
huge issue. Huge issue. That's
I
what the
had a
vote showed.
suggestion from the very beginning. Is so there is a process that we have where if somebody wanted to turn if they wanted a turn their road into like a one-way or something. You need to go and you go along the street and you collect everybody who's on the street. Signatures and whatever, and saying this is the new policy we want on our street. And I kind of heard somebody else was saying, I know we don't have this policy for all for parking yet, but you know, you kind of have to do that policy. You kind of have to do that a little bit if you want to get a handicap parking in front of your house. I know a neighbor who had to do that because they needed one for his elderly mother and whatever. But so we kind of have this idea where if you want something to change on your street, you just got to get all your neighbors to agree. And I think that if we can tweak our current ordinance right now that say, okay, we currently have this overnight snow ban. You can lift it if you can come up with a better policy for your street and let it happen street by street. Because I recently read somebody actually acknowledged that it's not even neighborhood by neighborhood. It's very street by street on what's appropriate for that street, because there's some streets that are so narrow, and like even in West Newton, I know that there's some families that live on Border Street. They have no off-street parking, and so during the winter ban, they're like going around knocking on doors and begging for people to have like driveway space or something. You know, even with the snow emergency, where can we park our cars? You can't be in a public lot because they want to clear the lot, and so. I do think, you know, within a certain neighborhood, the street knows what they need. And if you had a way and a process where the neighborhoods could petition for a segment of that they've determined that's all within reason, that there is a way that if they all agree that this is what they want for the
all
street.
agree. Now, that's a high threshold. Not majority, but everyone has to agree?
Well, with one way, you have to get everybody to agree.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, in one way, you have to have everybody that's on the street to agree with you. And what you do is you pick shorter. You can pick shorter segments. That's how they got Derby Street one way in front of the school.
I think the same process was used in Newton Highlands. A block up south of Lincoln Street, there's a short segment that goes over to Woodward.
Right.
Is it Woodward on that side? Yeah, it's Woodward on that side. That is one way, but the other side's not one way, but there's one segment.
I mean, it's got to meet with logic as well.
Okay.
But
well, here's what I want to do. I want to throw something out there and see what the panel thinks of it, because. Some years ago, this issue came up, and some years before that it came up, and some years before that it came up, and every time this issue has come up of repealing the overnight seasonal parking ban, there's been a different justification for keeping it. I served for 18 years on the city council, and snow was rarely the justification for keeping it. Once we had the police chief come and say, well, people can hide behind parked cars. I'm not making this up. It's a crime issue. People hiding behind those parked cars, it makes for, and then you would think, well, is there a crime spree 9 months out of the year when they're hiding behind these parked cars? I mean, there's been a series of shifting rationalizations and justifications for it. And I don't think the current one is actually that bad. The current rationalization for what is otherwise, it seems to me, I agree with Stephen, a totally irrational policy in a day and age where you can communicate via the internet and phone calls and say, hey, look, we're declaring a snow emergency. Get your cars off the street. And we, in fact, do that. That's why, because you don't just plow for 4 hours in the middle of the night. You plow 24/7 until you get the snow cleared. So to me, the idea of a seasonal overnight parking ban based on snow is pure silliness. So it's a solution in search of a problem that it's solving. And the current problem is the one Greer articulated, which is frankly a very new problem, which is our zoning ordinances don't provide for adequate off-street parking. But it's a new problem because they always used to provide for adequate off-street parking. It seems to me if your zoning ordinances were fixed to provide for adequate off-street parking, why would you need this seasonal off-street parking ban? But there was a compromise proposed some years ago, and it was I think we had a few co-sponsors for it. But it was simply to say that some neighborhoods want it, as Stephen pointed out, and some do not. And we weren't as fine as street by street, but our proposal was simply to say that if a neighborhood wanted to do a pilot of this, what they could say is, we're going to do a temporary program, a pilot program, where folks can park on the street overnight, and maybe even park in those 2-hour zones. We talked about including that. But you get a sticker, you pay a little fee, and then that car and then we'll see if that causes a real problem. And at one point, the Newton Highlands Area Council was considering it for the Highlands, but we needed the city council to authorize it, and for whatever reason, at the time, it's funny, people have flipped sides since then, but some of the people who were the biggest opponents of it, of repeal, now supported repeal this time. But go figure, people are open-minded and change their minds. But the point simply being that never happened. But what would you think of just saying, okay, if Newton Highlands, for example, which overwhelmingly voted for repeal, wanted to do a pilot, why not let them?
Just off the top of my head, sure. I mean, I guess I'd want a little bit more about it, But sure, if communities have a rationale for doing it and can justify that, you could try that as a trial. Trials are really interesting. The Washington Street Diet is on a 10-year trial.
But that is physical roadway changes.
Yeah, and
so
that sounds to me like,
a
whole bunch of us aren't going to be around 10 years from now. But that's more than a trial. Yeah, well, it's more than a trial.
Especially when you're in a city where a bunch of our temporary buildings that are only supposed to be for 15 years lasted for like 60.
That's a fair point, Stephen, but what we're talking about here is something that doesn't require construction and reconfiguration of a roadway.
Right. You're right.
Maybe some little signs on, but.
I think the city council is going to have very open conversations where you don't say no to anything until you've looked at everything you can look at. I'm always stunned that we built what was the most expensive high school in the United States when Newton North was built. And we didn't build a second level parking. We didn't take into account how many teachers were going to be there. We didn't take into account all of the students who are there. I know parking garages are expensive, but you got to do something with these cars. And would I love to live in a city where you walk and ride and skate? Sure. But that isn't going to happen in this city.
Nobody better make me skate. Last time I tried it, it was a disaster.
but that isn't going to happen in Newton for a very long time. And to deny the importance of the automobile to people is reckless. I think we need to have conversations by neighborhood and have open conversations and not have anyone be allowed to say no until it's all out there and we begin with some professional help, because none of us
we all need professional help.
Yeah, and none of us on the council are parking experts. Yeah. But there are things like maybe every Newton resident has to have a sticker for their car, so that the threat of people from Brookline parking on Newton streets, if we don't have a parking ban, they'll all come and park here. Or people from Watertown will come over and park here. Well, and you have fines that make people think.
Right. Not
to do a $25 fine. I mean, you spend more than that on a couple of beers. People don't respect a $25 fine. But if you say to them,
depends on what kind of beer you get.
If you say to people, it's $300 plus the cost of towing, that message would get out pretty quickly, and people would be saying to them, don't overpark
or
there.
escalation or something.
But to be clear, right now, if there's a declared snow emergency and you block the plows, you are towed.
Right.
So if you're,
And what do you find?
I mean, you have to pay the cost of, you have to
Right.
get, it's expensive. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm
But
not sure it's people pay probably a couple $100 before you're done with it. But nobody wants to have their car towed.
No, you don't.
So I want to
they
let
should.
Greer weigh in on this one. So I think your position on a pilot is that you'd be open-minded. It
Sure.
sounds like.
Sure.
All right, but you'd want to.
While the greater study is going on.
Okay.
Yes.
All
sure.
right. Greer, what do you think about the idea of piloting it in different neighborhoods? No, Nantum is one place. A lot of people.
And I think I do think that's a great idea. My thought really though is we in Newton seem to like to look for the silver bullet, you know, the solution that will solve everything. And I'm telling you, you're saying that this, you know, parking ban thing has come up so many times over the past year. We're a big city. We're a very diverse city. We have so many differences. You are not going to find the perfect answer for the entire city.
Right.
I think you need to come up with a process that is going to allow us to inch towards the right solution. And that's why I was proposing, you know, block by block, street by, I'm not sure what the right bite size is. I do think a neighborhood is a little bit too big because I know too many neighborhoods that they may be friends with each other, but the logistics of a neighborhood is very different. So maybe it's a matter of figuring out what the right bite size is, but I think a shorter way of coming with an organic way for this to slowly solve itself is the right way to go about it. Because if we keep trying to find and spend all this money on all this study and trying to come up with the perfect answer for the entire city, it's never going to happen.
No.
And we're going to be facing
The perfect
This
is the
bad
enemy
thing.
of the good.
That's right.
yeah, it really is. And I
Always.
think
Always.
I think we need to do it a
Let's try
little
to
smaller.
squeeze in our final topic.
Okay.
I'll make it real quick. I want to ask, in a few words, whether you felt like there was any, now beyond the Newton ballot election results, but those from other states. There were gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia. There were judicial retention races in Pennsylvania. There was a ballot question, one ballot question in California. There was a lot of national mood, let's say, going on last Tuesday on election day. And does any of that matter for the city of Newton? Good, bad, indifferent? Greer, what do you think?
I think it does. I think that there are many people in Newton that either spend their time in other states or definitely have kids that live in other states. I think...
I don't even mean for other states necessarily. I mean here. Are there implications for right here in the city of Newton of what's happening in these elections?
I think that our residents do. I think that we like to look at things at the national level. If I were to criticize, I think that sometimes they pay more attention to the national level than the local level, which I think they should be paying more attention to. So, but
Stephen,
I do think they care.
do you think that what happened on election day outside of Newton affects what's going on in Newton?
I do believe that. I think there are many people in the Senate and in the Congress of the United States who, after Tuesday's elections, are saying, well, we wanted that kind of change and we wanted to follow him, but looks like a whole lot of people think maybe not so far. And I'm very much hoping that the Senate and the House will start saying, we need to talk to the Democrats.
You think it might result in a more collaborative
I hope,
atmosphere in
and what I
Washington?
really hope is that not only will money flow for SNAP and for some other things, but some of the federal money that goes into research. You can't stop research and then continue it a couple of years later, scientific research. So Money will flow for that. Money will flow for roads.
I'm going to quickly
Sidewalks?
put my 2 cents in this.
Yes.
I agree, Stephen, that it has big implications for Newton. I would say that putting aside all the illegality of the current
Right.
federal administration, there is a, I have to say, a meanness to it. And I think there is, just putting, whether, like the food stamps is a good example, the SNAP cuts. There is a vindictiveness, there is a hostility, and I think that I believe that maybe we're seeing the first signs that national meanness, if I can use that word, is
Absolutely.
breaking. And that we can have kindness, once again, return to strengthen this country. And I just want to give one example of something in one of our neighboring communities where a Boston University student, the college Republican, said that he had been calling ICE for months on end to raid an Alston car wash to detain these criminals. These people, who, it turns out most of them were here legally, but they're being arrested, not a chance to access their papers, not a chance to get a lawyer, because this young man who's a student at Boston University thinks that they're criminals. And I would say that, while illegal too, is also just plain mean, and let's just make this country a little bit nicer place. With that, I think we're out of time. Thank you to Greer. Thank you to
you,
Stephen.
Ken, very much.
Thank you to
Greer,
our
thank you.
fabulous director, Will, and our fabulous crew, and everyone here at New TV. And please join us again next time, December 11th. Ooh, this is going to be a good one. December 11th, when we try to find just an eensy-weensy tiny bit more common ground.
Good.